Hey, did you see the latest CDC report on suicides in the US that was released? Close to 50,000 people died by suicide. On an average, that represents only 7% of all of those who experience ideation or made an attempt. You believe that? 7%. And what about the other 93%? Those of us who don't die. Like me, my last attempt was 25 years ago. My name is Tracey Medeiros, and I am a suicide attempt survivor, a state certified peer specialist, author, and trainer with a bachelor's in psychology and concentration and addictions. Within suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention efforts, we often hear the powerful stories of those who experience suicidal ideation and or attempts. We almost never hear about how and why that not only did their lives change because they stayed and had a life opportunities that they would not have had, but also how they were able to increase their own self-awareness and acceptance, that they continue to make a positive difference in the lives of others just by being there. Why is that? Why don't we in suicidology spend more time, energy, and research funding to engage those who experience ideation and or attempt and did not die by suicide? Why don't we do a better follow-up? Who can better help inform all of us what coping skills and actions do work? This is why we wrote Because I Stayed. To tell that, to tell that part of the recovery story. To offer an interactive tool to help encourage others to also stay. Ideation and attempt survivors are not all the same. There is no one size fits all, a cookie cutter solution for us any more than for suicide loss survivors, of which I am one. That's why we are gathered around this table. And because I stayed, you can read how I found my turning point and took suicide off the table. Tonight, you will hear others share snippets from their journey, which help reflect the diverse perspectives in recovery. So, let me introduce to you Joseph Marques. He is an author, one of our wellness workshop facilitators, and in his senior year at UMass Dartmouth. Joseph actually began supporting suicide prevention efforts 10 years ago. So, yeah, he's really young. I'll let him share the rest. Joe?
I stayed is because of music. The reason I stayed is because my sister. The reason I stayed is because my mom. Hello, my name is Joseph Marques. I live in Taunton, Massachusetts. In terms of suicide prevention and suicidology, I serve on the Bristol County Coalition for Suicide Prevention, and I also facilitate workshops with the Voice of the Table. The moment I realized I had a life worth living was in middle school, and I had my first attempt when I was in middle school. And I was seeing a lot of my family and friends and everyone around me struggling with the fact that I was struggling. And it kind of was a changing point for me, and it made me realize that I don't want the people around me to feel this way. I can remember a time in middle school when I was going through this crisis and seeing my mom have to drive me back and forth to all the hospitals, to the crisis center, to get me the services that I needed, and seeing how stressed out she was about everything and how much pain she was feeling because I was going through pain, even though she may not have necessarily verbalized it because I was in middle school, I was a kid, and she didn't necessarily want me to hear about that. I could kind of visually tell through like how she was talking to other people, how worried she seemed, like physically, and like her body language. I could tell that she was in pain because I was going through so much struggles, and that made me realize that I didn't want to put that on anyone, and I didn't want to see anyone else in my family have to struggle because of me. When I first started having struggles with suicide back in middle school, I went through a lot of therapy and in a lot of clinical situations to help cope with the struggles. And through that, I've gained a lot of coping skills. Um, so I kind of worked through a lot of my struggles and trauma using music. Has been a big coping skill for me, just because a lot of songs are very relatable. Either a lot of songs are either A, very relatable, or B, thought provoking. And when it's relatable, it makes me kind of feel something. It makes me realize that I'm not necessarily alone in these feelings, that we're all humans and we all go through them. And then when it's thought provoking music, it really makes me think about myself in a way. Sometimes it makes me think about things that I've gone through and why I feel the way I feel about those things, and be able to work through a lot of those struggles. Another coping skill that I use a lot recently, not then because obviously I wasn't able to drive then, but I can drive now. I love going on drives because it's kind of just a way for me to de-stress, not have to think about anything else. I'm the one in control of the vehicle. I have no worries other than just focusing on the road. So it kind of helps me just like take a break, take the load off. But this is always a lifelong struggle. Workshops have also been super helpful because, again, it's kind of the same thing about the relatability with music. It kind of helps me realize that I'm not the only person going through this. And journaling has also been very, very, very helpful because it helps me write my thoughts down, write my feelings down, be able to look back at it. And also sometimes writing things out, I start to write things I didn't even think in my head, and then I'm like, oh, that's why I feel like this. Or, oh, that's like the connection from this thought to this past thing that has happened to me. So those are just a couple of things that have been really helpful for me. One of the workshops that has helped me a lot is the Re-Energize and Reconnect workshop that we do through A Voice at the Table. It helped me work through a lot of thoughts and feelings and just a lot of different things in my life. And that's one of the reasons now why I'm a facilitator for A Voice at the Table, because I realize this workshop's helped me a lot, and I want to be able to bring that to other people, especially young people, because I feel like there are not enough resources, at least advertised, for young people. The reason I stayed is because of my friends and family. You can connect with me on Facebook. My Facebook is Joseph Marques. Last name is Marques. You can also find me on Instagram. It's JosephMM99.
Nice to hear from Joseph. My name is Annemarie Matulis. I'm the co-founder of A Voice at the Table that Joseph referred to, and the Impacted Family and Friends movement. And I'd like to add a very important fact about Joseph's value on our team. We were in the midst of an exercise. We were preparing to deliver workshops to re-energize and reconnect, and the exercise was on forgiveness. And I said, well, like the song that Don Henley wrote and the Eagles performed. To which Joseph stood there and stared. And as I recovered from my shock, as he said, who's Don Henley? Who are the Eagles? I realized how important it is for us within A Voice at the Table to make sure that the language we use in our workbook exercises can be easily adapted to any age group of ideation and attempt survivors and their impacted family. Of course, that awareness translated into a new assignment for Joseph, and that is he is helping us adapt the language in all of our exercises in all 4 workbooks that we have, so that it is easily accessible to younger people, and where we're also working on those who are even much older. Now, that's an equity issue and an inclusion issue. And someone who actually specializes in diversity, equity, and inclusion is our next guest. I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Pada Suyemoto. She will tell her story.
Activist. Hi, I'm Dr. Pada Suyemoto. I am a mental health activist. As an attempt survivor of suicide, I spent a long time very depressed and struggling with ideation. I also had a child in 1994, and at that time I was 33 years old, and that was really my turning point, because I feel very strongly that I have a responsibility and an obligation to live for my daughter. I don't think I had thought as fully about what that would mean in my life overall when I had my daughter, but I really feel like if I don't live for her, then I am not fulfilling my responsibility as a parent. So when she was born, I had a very strong protective factor, if you will. My therapist, whenever I would get very suicidal, he would say, "But what about your daughter?" And I would be like, "Oh, all right, yes, you're right." He would say, "You're going to ruin her life," and he's right. And he knew that was unacceptable to me. And then as I healed and got more recovery, I learned also that it was important for me to live for myself. But the turning point and the trump card, if you will, was the fact that I had a daughter. And through that, I also found a voice to talk about these issues, a voice to be an activist, a mental health activist. And I think that was also in some ways a turning point in taking my pain and my experiences and really sharing them out to be able to help someone else who is also struggling. So one of the things about having a child was my desire to make her experience different than mine growing up. My mother had bipolar disorder, and her illness was always kind of a secret. It wasn't a secret. Of course, we experienced it, but no one ever talked about it openly. No one ever said, your mom has bipolar disorder and it affects her and you in these ways. So when I had a major depressive episode, I decided that I was going to be open with my daughter and share, because I feel it's really important to talk to children about our own mental health concerns, as well about their feelings and their mental health concerns. So when my daughter was little, like she was 3, I would say, "Mommy has an illness that makes her sad, but it's not your fault." Because little kids think that everything that is bad is their fault. So I feel like it's very important for us to be able to share what we're going through in language they understand, and not to burden them with our problems. I would also say that, like, she would try to cheer me up or something like that, and I would say, "Thank you, honey, but mommy has helpers that can help her, and you don't have to be that person to try to cheer me up. I really appreciate your effort, and you don't have to be that person." So going through recovery and doing many things to support that, including art and bicycle riding and therapy and medication and Reiki and acupuncture and lots of things I did to work toward my recovery. My soul care and my strategies for coping have always been broad. I feel like having a major mental illness, such as major depression and complex PTSD, like I have, means that a lot of my life has to be spent taking care of myself. And I do that through Western treatment modalities like medication and therapy. But I also have a number of strategies that work for me. Things like art. I do a lot of collage. I'm also a jewelry designer. I also work with resin. So I really feel like artistic expression and healing through the arts has been really important for me. In addition, I'm a writer. I journal, I write in my journal, and I also write essays and blogs and other kinds of things like that. I feel like the things I do artistically and my soul care are just as important as the therapeutic things I do. So the other thing I do is I do ride my bicycle. I actually rode my bicycle across the country in 2012. I don't ride quite that much anymore, but I do ride, and I feel like that's another way of taking care of myself. It's a thing I really like to do. And I used to carry a list, actually, of coping strategies, and I had different categories like connection, like calling friends and connecting on social media and those kinds of things. And then I had a category for distraction, watching funny movies or listening to music. I like to listen to music. Creative healing modalities. I also do Reiki, which is a Japanese energy healing. I do that. I do that for other people. I also do it for myself. I've done acupuncture, a lot of things that I've done to be able to promote my recovery and my healing. And I think it's as important to do those things, because we all have mental health. We may not all have mental illness, but we all have mental health, and we need to attend to our mental health, and we need to be able to take care of ourselves to do that, so that we can help other people as well. So I feel like, when we think about children, not only do we need to think about, how they create reasons for us to stay, but also ways to talk to them about what's going on, so we don't perpetuate trauma that they could have based on our experiences.
Potter made a reference to a very common thread for all of us at the table tonight, and that is that something, somewhere, prompted most of us, all of us, to get involved and motivated us into activism and advocacy. And within that platform, while we were advocating for a cause, in this case, suicide prevention, we each found our own voice. And it's really important. And we bring those collective voices to the table right now in the hope that together we can be help and encouragement of the others. If you're wondering where those prompts are coming from, they're coming from the notebook, Because I Stayed. Those are available. You can see that right now. It's available on Amazon. It's also available in an ebook form, and very shortly it will be out in Audible. But that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that after we hear from our next guest, who has a tremendous amount of lived experience, and we add her threads to the tapestry. So I would love to introduce our table guest from sunny California, Dr. Jenn Carson.
Hi, thank you for joining us from Because I Stayed. My name is Dr. Jenn Carson, and in my lifetime, I have survived several decades of suicidal ideation and several days of life-threatening suicidal behaviors. And this occurred after I survived extensive childhood abuse, neglect, and trauma. Today, I work in suicide hotline management, and I am a suicide prevention educator. I teach Safe Talk, which is suicide alertness, assist, applied suicide intervention skills, and mental health first aid. I'm also a doctoral level macro social worker, which means I focus on systems change and policy. I became involved in suicide prevention as a child, and unfortunately, I was preventing my own suicide. I had experienced extensive trauma as a small child. And this included witnessing domestic violence, experiencing childhood abuse and neglect, witnessing other types of violence, and experiencing parental incarceration. At one point, my mother and I were in hiding for several years from my violent birth father and my stepmother, who at the time were suspects in several homicides. They were later convicted of 3 of the 12 homicides that they were suspected of. And later they were called in the media the San Francisco witch killers. It was unfortunately a high profile situation. So as a small child, I also had to deal with media around the experience. I was an anxious, depressed, and traumatized kid with an eating disorder, a mood disorder, complex trauma, and suicidal thoughts, as well as suicidal behaviors. When I was a preteen, my new stepfather started really investing some time in me, and got me some help from doctors, or clergy, as well as some mental health professionals. And I needed help for a number of years, especially after an additional trauma, which was a sexual assault in college. In total, as I mentioned, I spent about 20 years battling suicidal thoughts, intent, and actions. While I haven't had suicidal thoughts in several years, I have to be truly active in my treatment with a family doctor, a psychiatrist, a therapist, and a peer support group. And it is, it's challenging. Even now, as I consider myself in long-term recovery, it is something I have to actively work on. But as someone who lives in long-term recovery, I have some good news, and that is the vast majority of people who attempt suicide will never make a second attempt. There's even research that 90% of people who survive a suicide attempt will never die of suicide at a later time. And so that is the good news that is just not often shared. So often the focus on suicide is really just on the fact that it's the 10th leading cause of death. And we're not focusing on the fact that for every individual who dies of suicide, there's research that over 300 individuals had suicidal thoughts but survive. And so that is incredible news. Today, I'm proud to serve in suicide hotline management in Southern California. And I've learned from being on both sides of the experience, both as an individual with suicidal thoughts and then as someone who's answered hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of suicide hotline calls, that a caring voice and a listening ear can take a moment of danger into a moment of safety. As I mentioned earlier, I'm also a suicide prevention trainer. And it's my hope that every single person that's hearing my voice right now will sign up for ASSIST, the Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training. That's a really comprehensive course of about 15 hours. Or sign up for mental health first aid, a 1-day class, an 8-hour class, or Safe Talk, a 3-hour suicide alertness training, or a briefer training called QPR, Question, Persuade, Respond. I'm a big believer that those of us in recovery can be agents of change when we get evidence-based training tools that we can utilize with others. This can be incredibly powerful. In my recovery journey, I've learned that helping others can be incredibly empowering for someone who is in recovery to feel empowered to help others. Other actions you take instead of getting trained is to join a local NAMI chapter, National Association of Mental Illness, or a local chapter of AFSP, which is the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention, or joining a division of the American Association of Suicidology. Another action you can take is most counties and states have, or cities have, a local suicide prevention coalition. It can be really powerful to join one of those coalitions. And just be, if you're in recovery, I just think it's just really powerful to become part of a movement, to prevent suicide. Because gaining those tools and learning how to talk about suicide in a helpful manner can be incredible, because we know that talking about suicide prevents suicide. If you're early in your recovery journey, I would say be open to as much help as you can get, whether it's through therapy, a medical provider, a peer support specialist, a peer support group, and so on, to actively enter recovery yourself. And in my recovery and suicide prevention journey, I now very clearly see that suicide is not just an individual mental health problem. It's really tied to despair, and especially in some of our marginalized groups. And we really need to listen, especially to other suicide attempt survivors who are trans youth, non-binary youth, Latina youth, Indigenous women, rural elders, Black youth, veterans. And we just really need to amplify those voices for systems change in our schools, our workplaces, our health systems, our faith communities, because suicide prevention is a human rights issue and it needs a grassroots swell. I'm always celebrating Lorenzo Lewis, who is taking suicide prevention into our historic Black barbershops. This is where we need to be. We need to be in these spaces. I also celebrate, there's a project in my community and with the Coachella migrant farm worker community in the past to do suicide prevention through Spanish-speaking radio. These are really the spaces that we need to be in, and we need to really amplify voices of survivorship and recovery through writing and art and folk art and photography and TikTok challenges, and being inclusive of our Black, Brown, Indigenous, immigrant, and queer communities, and getting involved in speakers bureaus through NAMI and AFSP, so that we can just amplify lived experience voices, giving help and hope, and so on. I always say we need to spread hope like confetti. And as we reach the 1-year anniversary of 988, we need to continue to tell everyone, if you're experiencing a mental health crisis or suicidal thoughts, call 988. But it needs to go beyond telling people to call 988, because suicide prevention is not just a 20-minute phone call. For some of us, it's really a lifelong process. And right now I'm just trying to live in recovery and model recovery for others and spread recovery, and build a life worth living for myself and others. But it's really one step at a time. My own recovery plan involves seeing a therapist and seeing a psychiatrist who manages my medications. But I've really been open to all types of evidence-based and research-based methods. I use nutritional management that's been found to be helpful with individuals who live in recovery from a mental illness. For example, I do a high omega-3 diet, and I've used art therapy and light therapy and music, and I've even done float therapy, which I have in a float chamber, which I have felt helps with emotional regulation. And so I think it's really important to be open to using all types of methods, right? So it's, as I ponder on this concept of because I stayed, and being now 30 years into my journey, which started when I was an 8-year-old. I'm so thankful I stayed, because there have been such phenomenal moments of joy. I dreamt of becoming Dr. Jenn, and I am Dr. Jenn today. I dreamt of going to Paris one day, and I've done it. I've been to Paris, France, and I love bodies of water. And so as I stand at the ocean and hear the waves, or I'm at a lake, or I'm at a river, those are those moments where I just think, oh, thank goodness I stayed. Thank goodness I have overcome this childhood onset suicidality. Thank goodness I stayed to enter recovery with my CPTSD, complex post-trauma, and my atypical mood disorder, because I've had such incredible moments of joy and peace. And it's hard, and it takes a lot of work. And I have to continue doing this work, whether I'm doing reflective journaling, or I'm going to a support group on a night that I don't feel like going, or going to therapy on a day I don't feel like going, or responding to that timer on my phone to take my medication. It's work, but it's worthwhile work. And I'm so thankful that I'm here today, and that not only am I building a life worth living for myself, I am engaged in suicide prevention service to help build lives worth living for others. And it's and I'm just trying to, every day, I just am trying to help others and spread hope like confetti, like I said. So I'm thankful I stayed, and I hope you do too. Stay with us. It gets better.
And Jen's comments really lead to, you may ask, how did this all start? In November of 2021, Tracey and I were doing a live stream on gratitude. It was right around Thanksgiving. And Tracey was going down this incredible list of all the things that had happened in her life because she stayed. That we had been able to go to Northern Ireland and present our Re-Energize and Reconnect workshops to the European community. That we had made a couple of trips to the Grand Canyon, which is always breathtaking and life-changing. that she had her grandchildren in her life, her children and her grandchildren in her life. And as she was going down the list, I just quietly said, kind of offhand, and I said, well, yes, that's because you stayed. And that was the impetus back in 2021 to begin these notebooks. And they're notebooks intentionally, not War and Peace volumes. They're notebooks that you can actually write in and not get yelled at by me, to help people stop and think about the very things you heard from 3 different ideation attempt survivors share. As Tracey said in the beginning, there is no such thing as a one-size-all cookie cutter solution to this. So that when the numbers come out from the CDC every year, as they just did a few months ago, to show that almost 50,000 people died by suicide, that is a catastrophic tragedy to every family and every community. At the same time, that is approximately 5 to 7% of all of those who struggled. What about the other 93%? You just heard, listened to, and I hope felt in your heart the stories of these very powerful people in recovery with gratitude that they had stayed. When you get your copy of the first volume of Because I Stayed, with that QR code or going to Amazon, then you will see Tracey's whole premise for this this notebook series was her love of the old holiday film, It's a Wonderful Life. And the fact that for the character named Clarence to win his angel wings, he had to demonstrate to someone who was suffering suicidal ideation that they mattered, that having them stay would make a really positive difference in the lives of other people. That's what this is all about. It's about maybe we need a new strategy moving forward into 2024 to give as much time to those wonderful trainings that Jenn mentioned, Dr. Jenn mentioned, from Living Works and from QPR and from Mental Health America. That's all important work. But equally important is, why do we still not listen to the voices of lived experience, peer to peer, and also emphasize that strategy? If we do that, we might save lives. So what's next? What's next? 2 more volumes will be out by the end of October. So you'll have now 3 notebooks to work with and have fun with and play with. There will be more live streams. There will be more workshops. Check out our Instagram page for Because I Stayed, brand new Facebook page for Because I Stayed. And then there is this now YouTube channel, and you can be sure that you'll be seeing most of us repeatedly over the next several months and into 2024. Tracey and Pata and Joseph and Dr. Jenn and I just would love to thank you for spending a part of your day with us today. And let's take one of the threads that has been woven into this and make sure that we can all go out and spread hope. We spread hope and kindness. We can save lives. Let their voices be heard. Thank you for joining us this evening.